about World War II, what usually comes to mind first?
Well, typically it's, D-Day, the Battle of Britain, maybe the Eastern Front, Stalingrad.
Like the massive famous campaigns, France, the Pacific, maybe North Africa with Rommel?
Exactly. But what often gets overlooked, almost completely glossed over sometimes, is this really critical theater of operations.
A place where actually the fighting started years before 1939.
That's right, years earlier. And it's where the Allies arguably scored their first really decisive victory of the war.
And that forgotten theater. It's the Horn of Africa.
It is, the Horn of Africa. And for this deep dive, we've pulled together insights, especially drawing from Isaias Tesfamariam's work on Hoover.org and also Ezra Musa over at RedSeaBeacon.com.
Okay.
And these sources, they really highlight Eritrea's role, a consistent role but often missed as this kind of strategic hub across different conflicts.
And we're not just limiting this to World War II, are we? This stretches further.
No, definitely not. It goes from, the rise of Italian fascism right through World War II itself, then the Cold War, even up to the War on Terror more recently.
So let's start with that timeline shift, because that's pretty radical. We usually think Poland, September 1939, that's the start.
Right. But there's a strong argument, Professor Richard Pankhurst made it, that the conflict in Africa, specifically involving Ethiopia, really began much earlier.
When exactly?
October 3rd, 1935. That's when Italy invaded Abyssinia, which is modern-day Ethiopia.
1935. Wow, that's 4 years before Poland.
4 years. Pankhurst called it an augury, like a foreshadowing of the bigger global war that was coming.
So the War in the Horn wasn't just some sideshow that happened later. It was almost like the opening act.
You could definitely see it that way. And you find incredible context for this in places like the Hoover Institution archives.
Ah, right. You mentioned the Hoover material.
Yeah, they have collections like the Ruth Ricci Eltz papers, writings, photos, all related to that Italian-Abyssinian War in 35-36.
So real primary source stuff.
Exactly. You even see photos of Mussolini himself. It directly links that early colonial aggression in Africa to the global conflict that erupted later.
Okay, so if the fascist aggression started there, maybe the first major Allied victory against the Axis also happened there.
That's the argument Colonel A.J. Barker makes. He called the Allied victory in the Horn of Africa, specifically in 1941, our first real victory of the Second World War.
1941. So that's even before Pearl Harbor brought the U.S. fully into the war.
Months before. And this wasn't some minor skirmish either. We're talking a huge multi-front campaign against what the Italians called Africa Orientale Italiana, or AOI.
And that covered
Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Italian Somaliland, a vast territory.
So how did the Allies tackle that?
It was basically a three-pronged attack. You had General Cerulean Platt moving south from Sudan into Eritrea.
Okay, from the north.
Then General Alan Cunningham pushing up north from Kenya into Somalia and Ethiopia.
From the south.
And really crucially, you also had the Ethiopian Patriot Forces fighting inside the territory, harassing the Italians, tying down troops. A vital internal resistance.
And the sources mentioned the fighting was incredibly fierce, especially in Eritrea.
Yes, particularly the Battle of Keren. It's described as the absolute peak of the Italian effort. General Carnemeo's troops, well, they might have fought harder there than anywhere else in the entire war.
What made Keren so tough?
The terrain. It's just brutal. Steep mountains, narrow passes, perfect defensive ground. The Italians were heavily fortified.
But the Allies managed to break through.
They did. It was costly, very hard won, but they broke the Italian lines at Keren, and that really paved the way for the end.
The final surrender.
Right. The Duca Medio d'Aosta, he was the viceroy and the commander-in-chief for all of Italian East Africa. He finally surrendered at Amba Alaji in Ethiopia. That was May 18th, 1941.
And that was it for Italy's empire in East Africa?
Effectively, yes. Their presence on the continent was basically eliminated. And again, this is all happening in the first half of 1941.
It's amazing how that victory isn't more widely known. And the archives you mentioned, they help put faces to this, right? Go beyond just troop movements.
Absolutely. The Hoover collection, for instance, it has telegrams from key Italian figures. People like Marshal Rodolfo Graziani.
Graziani. Wasn't he involved in some atrocities?
Yes, notoriously. He ordered the massacre of thousands in Addis Ababa in 1937 after someone tried to assassinate him. There's a whole book about it, the Addis Ababa massacre, so you see the harsh realities of the occupation.
But you also see the resistance side.
Definitely. The archive holds letters from figures like Dr. Malaku E. Bayan. He was a U.S.-educated Ethiopian doctor and anti-colonial organizer. It really underscores that this wasn't just about European powers fighting. It was about people fighting for their own freedom.
And what about the Allied forces? Who was actually doing the fighting on the ground?
Well, the Gramsci-Dorset photograph collection gives a great visual sense of that. You see the advances of the Indian Army troops, which included soldiers from what's now Pakistan, too, of course. They were absolutely pivotal in the fighting, especially at Keren.
So British command, but troops from across the empire.
Yes, and even photos of General Charles de Gaulle visiting the British and Free French forces there in Eritrea. It was a truly multinational Allied effort.
Okay, so we've established this huge, early, and successful Allied campaign in a place many people barely think about regarding World War II. Why? Why was the Horn of Africa, specifically Eritrea, so important in 1941 that the Allies poured resources into it?
Right, that's the crucial strategic question, and it ties into that phrase from Commander John D. Alden. He called the Red Sea the most forgotten theater of fighting in World War II.
Forgotten but vital.
Absolutely vital. Ezra Musa's sources really hammer this home. Taking Eritrea, securing that coastline, it opened the Red Sea.
Opened it to what? What was the big deal about the Red Sea?
Think about supplying the British forces fighting Rommel in North Africa, or just supplying Egypt and the Suez Canal generally.
Okay.
If the Red Sea is controlled or threatened by the Italians based in Eritrea and controlling the coastline,
Then ships can't get through.
exactly, or it's incredibly dangerous. So every single supply ship headed for Suez would have to take the long way around.
Down around South Africa, the Cape of Good Hope.
Precisely. Thousands and thousands of extra miles, weeks, maybe months added to every voyage, sailing through waters often infested with U-boats.
Wow. So taking Eritrea wasn't just about defeating the Italians there. It was about unlocking a critical supply line for the entire North African campaign.
It was the essential shortcut. It saved unimaginable time, resources, and probably lives. It allowed the U.S., even before formally entering the war, to start pouring supplies towards the British fight against the Axis in Africa through Lend-Lease.
Which leads us to the American involvement, even pre-Pearl Harbor, Project 19.
Project 19. Yeah, this was a top-secret presidential directive set up in late 1941. It wasn't about sending combat troops, it was about logistics and support on a massive scale. Thousands of American personnel started showing up in Eritrea secretly.
Thousands? What on earth were they doing there?
Two main things, run by the War Department. First, they set up a huge air depot at a place called Gura, near Asmara.
An air depot for what?
Primarily to repair damaged Royal Air Force planes, the RAF aircraft fighting Rommel in the desert.
Ah, so instead of sending a damaged plane all the way back to, say, the UK or India,
You could fly at a relatively short distance to Gura, get it fixed up by the Americans, and have it back in the fight against the Africa Corps with, as the directive said, minimum delay.
that's a massive force multiplier, getting planes back into action quickly.
Huge. The second major part was fixing the port of Massawa on the Red Sea coast.
Fixing it. What was wrong with it?
The retreating Italians under Admiral Bonetti had absolutely wrecked it. They had a scorched earth policy.
How bad was it?
They deliberately scuttled about 40 German and Italian ships right in the harbor channels, blocking everything. They smashed cranes, generators, all the essential dock equipment. Their stated goal was to make Massawa forever useless to the Allies.
Forever useless. That sounds challenging to fix.
Incredibly challenging. The U.S. Navy brought in a salvage expert, Rear Admiral Edward Ellsberg, to basically rebuild the port from the ruins.
Ellsberg. Any relation to Daniel Ellsberg of Pentagon Papers fame?
His uncle, actually. Small world. But yeah, Edward Ellsberg had this monumental task of clearing the harbor and getting the port working again so Allied ships could actually dock and unload supplies.
And just getting the American personnel and equipment to Eritrea must have been a challenge in itself.
Immense and dangerous. The sources mention the Army transport ship Siboney. It carried about 600 members of the Project 19 mission and something like $50 million worth of crucial equipment. That's a fortune back then.
Did he make it?
It did, thankfully. Arrived safely in Massawa around February 1942. Apparently, they even published a little daily ship newspaper on the voyage called The Trailblazer.
But the threat was real. U-boats were active.
Very real. Another ship involved in the project, the SS Oklahoman, was sunk by U-boats. General Brereton, involved in the planning, estimated that loss alone would set Project 19 back by at least 6 months.
Wow. Were the Germans aware of how important this secret American operation was?
It seems so. There are reports that the infamous Nazi propagandist Lord Ha actually mentioned details of the American convoy, its size, speed, direction, in one of his radio broadcasts.
An intelligence leak. That really highlights the strategic stakes. Even as the main focus was elsewhere, the Nazis knew this Eritrean supply line was a critical weakness to target.
Absolutely. It shows that controlling Eritrea wasn't just a regional issue, it directly impacted the main effort against Rommel.
So World War II ends, the Axis are defeated. Does Eritrea just fade back into obscurity?
Not at all. Its location, commanding that Red Sea access, meant its strategic value just shifted to the next global confrontation, the Cold War.
Right, and this is where Kagnew Station comes into the picture.
Kagnew Station, yeah. Set up in Asmara, the capital. It operated from the 1950s right through to the 1970s.
And officially, it had a role in space exploration.
That was the public face. And a real role, too. It was a key part of NASA's deep space network. It played a vital role in communications for missions like the Apollo moon landing in 1969, connecting Eritrea to the moon, essentially.
Pretty cool. But the sources suggest there was a much bigger, more secret purpose.
Oh, yeah. Its main value, really, was to the National Security Agency, the NSA.
For spying.
Basically, yes. Kagnew Station was like a giant, perfectly positioned listening post. Its location gave the U.S. an incredible asymmetric intelligence advantage. It could intercept signals, communications across parts of the Soviet Union, the Middle East, and Africa that other U.S. bases simply couldn't reach.
So a unique electronic ear.
Exactly. And it proved absolutely critical during really tense moments, like the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. While the world held its breath, this station in Asmara was providing vital intelligence that helped the U.S. navigate that standoff.
It's incredible. A place most Americans probably couldn't find on a map was central to avoiding nuclear war.
It really shows how geography can translate into immense strategic power.
And the pattern continues, doesn't it? After the Cold War, interest maybe waned a bit, but then 9/11 happens.
And suddenly that strategic geography becomes hyper-relevant again. Almost instantly, you see top U.S. officials heading to Asmara.
Who visited?
General Tommy Franks, who was heading U.S. Central Command at the time, he visited in 2002. And then later that same year, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld went.
Rumsfeld, what was the message there?
Rumsfeld publicly praised Eritrea's cooperation in the new war on terror. He even said the U.S. could learn much about combating terror from Eritrea. It was a very clear, very public reaffirmation of its strategic importance in this new global conflict.
So what makes it so continuously vital right up to today? What is it about that specific location?
It boils down to one thing, mainly. The Bab el-Mandeb Strait.
The Gate of Tears. Explain why that's so important.
It's the narrow bottleneck, the southern gateway, connecting the Indian Ocean to the Red Sea.
So all the ships going to or from the Suez Canal have to pass through there.
Pretty much everything. A huge percentage of global trade oil, manufactured goods, everything funnels through that narrow strait. Eritrea sits right there overlooking it. Its coastline essentially commands that choke point.
So if there's instability in Eritrea or if the strait is threatened,
It sends shockwaves through the global economy. It impacts energy prices, supply chains, everything. So Eritrea's stability isn't just a local issue, it's critical for global maritime security.
and the sources also position it as a buffer state.
Yes, its stability directly affects its neighbors, Sudan, Ethiopia, Somalia. It plays a role in regional dynamics, counter-piracy efforts off the coast, counter-terrorism. Its stability is deeply intertwined with the peace of the wider region.
It's a compelling case for its enduring importance. But throughout all this being a stage for Italian fascists, Allied logisticians, Cold War spies, war on terror partners, it's crucial we don't forget the Eritrean people themselves, right? They weren't just passive bystanders in their own land.
Absolutely not. That's a vital point. This wasn't just geography. It was and is a nation. And they consistently asserted their own desire for agency, for sovereignty.
You have that powerful quote.
Yes, from Sheikh Ibrahim Sultan. He was addressing the United Nations back in 1949 when the fate of Eritrea after World War II was being debated.
What did he say?
He said very clearly, "The Eritrean people do not wish to be handed from one master to another. They aspire to freedom, independence, and equality among nations."
Not handed from one master to another. That really captures the struggle against being just a pawn in these larger geopolitical games.
It does. It underlines that while the world powers saw strategic value, the Eritrean people saw their homeland and fought for their right to determine its future.
So wrapping this all up, the big takeaway from this deep dive seems to be that seemingly small nations, if they happen to occupy these crucial geopolitical crossroads,
They can have an absolutely profound, often hidden impact on the course of major global events. From enabling that first big Allied win in World War II by opening the Red Sea, to giving the U.S. that intelligence edge during the Cold War via Kagnew.
it forces you to rethink how history unfolds and where the real turning points might lie.
Definitely.
So thinking about today then, if, as the sources suggest, Eritrea's stability really is synonymous with regional peace and vital for global trade, what does acknowledging this long history of its strategic importance mean for how countries like the U.S. should engage with Asmara now?
Well, I think it means you can't treat Eritrea as marginal or just react to crises. Acknowledging this history means understanding its inherent, enduring strategic weight. It suggests that engagement, dialogue, partnership, it needs to reflect that reality. Ignoring it or treating it as a footnote seems naive given how consistently important its geography has proven to be.
It implies a need for consistent, respectful engagement, recognizing its central role rather than just periodic interest based on immediate threats.
Exactly. Recognizing its history means recognizing its ongoing strategic significance and potentially the responsibility that comes with that for ensuring regional stability.
That's a really powerful final thought. It certainly makes you look at that part of the world, maybe the nature of global power, a little differently. Something for you, the listener, to definitely think about next time you glance at a world map.